The phone rang at 2:17 in the morning. My hands trembled before I even picked it up. After decades of living alone, I had always feared late-night calls. They usually meant news too heavy to wait for sunrise. When I pressed the receiver to my ear, a calm voice from St. Mary's Hospital broke my world apart. "Mrs. Turner, your son David has been admitted with a suspected aneurysm. You should come immediately." For a few seconds, the words did not make sense. My David, at 42. Healthy. Strong. Always jogging in the mornings. Always reminding me to watch my diet. He could not be dying. I slipped into the car with my coat thrown over my nightgown. My hair still tangled from sleep. The steering wheel was wet with sweat from my palms. By the time I arrived, it was already too late. A doctor with tired eyes led me into a private room. His lips moved with phrases like, "massive rupture. Nothing could be done. Already gone." My legs gave way, and I had to clutch the chair. 10 years earlier, I had buried my husband. I thought I knew grief. But this was a different storm. This was my only child. Hours passed in a blur of paperwork. Sign here. Initially there. Do you want an autopsy? What about organ donation? I felt numb. As if my body was present, but my mind was floating somewhere else. It was nearly noon when Sophie, my daughter-in-law, finally arrived. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. Her nails were freshly manicured, tapping impatiently on her phone screen as she walked toward me. "Traffic was horrible," she said without meeting my eyes. "And I had to find someone to watch Ethan." Ethan, my grandson, 8 years old, sensitive, bright. I had already called his school, spoken to his teacher, and arranged for him to stay with a friend's family for the day. Sophie had not even thought about that. The realization pierced through my fog. "David is gone," I said simply. I watched her face. Her mouth opened slightly. Her hand moved to her throat, as though she had rehearsed this reaction many times. For one brief second, I thought I saw real regret. Then it vanished, replaced by something else. Calculation. Relief. "I was not sure," she murmured. "But he was fine yesterday. We had dinner. He was in his study when I went to bed." Her words cracked. But no tears followed. Throughout the day, I noticed her stepping away for hushed phone calls, turning her back whenever hospital staff approached with questions. When decisions had to be made about the remains, she said quickly, "You know what he would want better than I do." That evening, as we waited for the body to be released, Michael Harris, David's closest friend and attorney, arrived. His face was red from crying. He hugged me tightly, whispering, "I can't believe he's gone. I just had lunch with him on Monday." When he turned to Sophie, offering condolences, she nodded with a polished sadness that looked like it belonged on stage. Michael's eyes flicked to mine for a moment, and I could tell he sensed the same hollowness I did. "We'll need to meet soon," he told both of us. David left very specific instructions in his will. Sophie straightened at that, dabbing at eyes that were still dry behind the dark glasses. "Of course. Tomorrow. Maybe. I'd like to get everything settled quickly. For Ethan's sake." The mention of Ethan brought a fresh wave of pain. He had lost his father, and his mother was already talking about settlements. Later, as Sophie and I walked toward the parking lot, I caught her reflection in a window. She adjusted her hair, checked her lipstick, and lifted her phone again. No grief, no exhaustion, only cold assessment, as though she were calculating her next chess move. That night, and back in my empty house, I sat alone in the dark. My son was gone. My grandson was left with a mother who looked at tragedy as an inconvenience. And I had no idea yet how deeply David had prepared for this very moment. The funeral came 3 days later. I wore black, not because tradition demanded it, but because my heart felt colorless. The church filled with colleagues, clients, neighbors, people who had admired David for his fairness, his humor, his quiet generosity. They shared stories that brought both pride and unbearable sorrow. Meanwhile, Sophie performed like a seasoned actress. Her dress was elegant, her hair styled into waves, her makeup flawless. She leaned on me at carefully chosen moments, whispering lines like, "He would have loved to see such a turnout," but her weight was feather light, ready to lift the instant someone important passed by. Beside me, Ethan's small body shook with silent sobs. He clung to my arm, his tears soaking the tissue I offered. During a quiet hymn, he whispered, "Grandma, is Dad really in there?" "Yes." "Sweetheart, his body is, but the part that made him Daddy, his love, his thoughts, his spirit, that part is always with you." He nodded, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Sometimes I can still feel him, like he's watching." "I believe he is," I told him, my own tears threatening again. Across me, Sophie hissed, "Sit up straight. Ethan, people are watching." That was when I understood why David had so often left Ethan in my care. He knew his son needed someone who would see him, not someone obsessed with appearances. After the service, people lined up to share condolences. One woman clutched my hands and said, "Your son helped me keep my house during my divorce. He lowered his fees when he realized I was struggling." Another, an older gentleman, said, "David was the only attorney willing to take my discrimination case. He cared about justice, not just billable hours." I collected each story like fragile glass pieces, storing them for the day Ethan would need them. He deserved to know what kind of man his father had been. As mourners left, I noticed Sophie speaking in low tones with a tall, well-dressed man I had never seen. When I approached, she introduced him as Richard Hale, one of David's real estate partners. His handshake was brief, his condolences perfunctory, and the way Sophie's hand lingered on his sleeve told me far more than words. That night, exhaustion consumed me. Ethan fell asleep on a couch in the funeral home's side room. Michael pulled me aside and said quietly, "David asked me to give you a message. Trust your instincts about Ethan. You'll know what it means." I glanced at my grandson's sleeping face, then back at Sophie, who was fixing her makeup in a compact mirror. Yes, I knew exactly what it meant. 2 days after the funeral, I walked into Michael Harris's office. The blinds were half closed, soft afternoon light falling across stacks of legal files. The smell of coffee lingered in the air. I sat down slowly, my knees stiff from lack of sleep. Sophie entered moments later. She wore a black suit that was more runway than mourning, a silk scarf around her neck, diamond earrings sparkling. Her eyes were hidden behind another pair of sunglasses. Though we were indoors, Michael cleared his throat. "Thank you both for coming. As executor of David's estate, I have to read the provisions of his will." Sophie straightened in her chair, her lips pressed together in a faint smile, as though she already knew what was coming. I folded my hands in my lap, bracing myself. Michael read carefully, his voice steady. "To my wife, Sophie Carter. I leave the lake house in Vermont, my investment portfolio with Hale and Partners, and the life insurance policy of $500,000. Sophie's smile widened. I saw the satisfaction flash across her face. But Michael did not stop there. "To my mother, Margaret Turner. I leave the family home at Willow Lane, both of my vehicles, and my personal account at First National Bank." The words echoed in the room. I sat frozen, unsure if I had heard correctly. The house, the cars, the bank account I never knew about. Sophie's expression shifted in an instant. Confusion, then shock, then anger quickly disguised as wounded disbelief. "That has to be a mistake," she said sharply. "We bought that house together. It's our marital property." Michael slid a folder across the desk. "The deed shows it was purchased solely in David's name before your marriage. It was never converted to joint property." Her manicured nails drummed against the leather armrest. "This is absurd. David and I discussed our estate plans. He would never leave me in such a position. The will was updated 3 months ago." Michael replied. "David came in personally to make the changes." Her jaw clenched. She turned toward me, her voice suddenly soft, pleading, Margaret. You have your own home. You don't need the Willow Lane house. David would have wanted Ethan to stay in his family home. Surely you won't take that away from him. The manipulation was smooth, almost elegant. She framed it as if I were taking something from Ethan. Not from her, I said quietly. I need time to process all of this. Michael continued with smaller bequests, charities, personal items, funeral expenses that had already been arranged. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sophie sending quick texts under the table. Her face a mask of practiced grief. When the meeting ended, Michael asked me to stay behind. Once she left with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. He closed the door and handed me a sealed envelope. David left this with instructions to give it to you privately. My hands shook as I took it. The envelope was addressed in David's handwriting. The sight of those familiar strokes nearly broke me. I slipped it into my purse and whispered, "Thank you." In the lobby, I spotted Sophie by the reception desk. Her voice was low but sharp as she spoke on the phone. Completely blindsided me. The house, the cars, even the trust for Ethan. No, I don't think he suspected anything. Must have been his mother's influence. Of course I'm going to fight it. Richard, 10 years with this family, and all I get is a lake house. I deserve more. I did not wait for her to see me. I turned toward the stairwell and left quietly. Back at my small cottage, with Ethan still at school. I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of letterhead from David's law office. His handwriting filled the page. Mom, if you are reading this, it means the unthinkable has happened. I am sorry to leave you with this burden, but there is no one I trust more. My marriage has been failing. What began as distance grew into something more concerning. I discovered things about Sophie that make me fear for Ethan's future and for your security. I arranged things to protect you both. The house, the cars, the money are not for you alone. They are tools to ensure Ethan has one stable, loving parent figure when I am gone. Sophie will fight this. Do not let her know what you know. Watch. Wait. Document everything. Michael has the rest of my instructions. He will guide you when the time is right. I love you. Mom, you taught me to see people clearly. Now I need you to use that gift to protect my son. David. Tears blurred the ink as I pressed the letter to my chest. Even in death, my son was trying to shield us. When Ethan came home that evening, his backpack slipping from his shoulders, he ran into my arms. His face was pale, his eyes red from holding back tears. Grandma, when is Dad coming back? The question cut through me. I held him close, whispering, Sweetheart, Daddy's body stopped working, but his love is still here. He is always with you. He nodded slowly, his small fingers clutching mine. I still feel him sometimes, like he's telling me to be strong. Yes, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. He wants us both to be strong. That night, as I tucked him into bed, I glanced at David's letter again. I realized this was no longer just about inheritance. It was about protecting Ethan from a woman who saw her son as leverage in a game she planned to win. And if I wanted to honor David's trust, I would have to become more than a grieving mother. I would have to become a strategist. The morning sun spilled through the curtains at Willow Lane, but the house felt colder than ever. I made pancakes the way David always had on Saturdays. The smell filled the kitchen, and Ethan's small feet padded across the tile. Grandma, Dad used to flip them so high, he said, watching me carefully turn one over. Do you want me to try? I smiled, even as tears burned my eyes. Not as high as your dad, but I'll do my best. He laughed softly. The sound fragile but real. Those moments mattered. I knew Sophie would soon arrive, and the warmth in the kitchen would disappear. By 10 o'clock, her car pulled into the driveway. She walked in without knocking, dressed in a fitted gray pantsuit, phone in hand. Her tone was polite but brisk. Margaret, we need to talk about the future. I offered her coffee, keeping my voice calm. Of course. Sit down. She perched at the island counter, stirring sugar into her cup without taking a sip. This house has too many memories. It's not healthy for Ethan or me to stay here. I found a condo downtown. Excellent schools. Closer to cultural life. But with the way David arranged things, I'll need your cooperation. I tilted my head as if I were confused. What do you mean? Her eyes narrowed, then softened again. Let's be honest. David wasn't himself those last months. Stressed. Distracted. Updating his will was a mistake. You don't want to cause trouble. Just transfer the deed to me. And Ethan will have stability. I folded my hands, nodding slowly as though her words were reasonable. I see. That must have been very difficult for you. For a moment, relief flickered across her face. She thought she had convinced me, but David's letter whispered in my memory. Do not let her know what you know. Watch. Wait. Document everything. I'll think about it. I told her. Her smile tightened. Good. But the condo won't stay on the market long. We should act quickly. Artificial urgency. A tactic I had taught my own students to recognize. After she left, I called Michael. She's pressing hard. Already talking about moving. Already pushing papers. Document every word, he advised. And keep Ethan close. She will use him when she needs leverage. That night, Ethan crawled into my lap with his science project. A model of the solar system. Dad always helped me with this. Will you? Of course, I said. As he glued the planets into place, I thought about Sophie's urgency. She was not grieving. She was plotting. 3 days later, Ethan mentioned something at bedtime that made my stomach clench. Mom says we're going to Miami this weekend. She said her friend Richard has a big boat. I kept my voice light. That sounds exciting. But don't you have a science project due Monday? He nodded. His little brow furrowed. I told her. She said I could skip it, but Dad always said commitments matter. After he fell asleep, I called Michael again. Miami. With Richard. He was silent for a long moment. Then it's starting. Eleanor. You need to play along. Don't fight her openly. Keep Ethan safe. And we'll gather evidence. The next afternoon, Sophie arrived with a weekend bag already packed for Ethan. She was radiant in a white blouse and designer sunglasses. When I mentioned the project again, she waved a hand. Teachers understand when a child loses a parent. He needs fun, not deadlines. Ethan looked down at his shoes. I put a hand on his shoulder and whispered, Do your best. I'll help you catch up. As they drove away, a cold dread settled in my chest. I knew Ethan would return sunburned and exhausted, maybe even sick. But more importantly, I knew Sophie would reveal herself. And she did. When he came back Sunday evening, his face was pale. His eyes shadowed. The boat made me sick. He muttered, clutching his stomach. He's being dramatic, Sophie said lightly, scrolling on her phone. The resort was 5-star. He had a wonderful time. Ethan's silence told another story. Later, upstairs, he confessed in a small voice. They left me with a babysitter at night. Twice. I woke up scared. I didn't know where I was. I swallowed the anger that rose in my throat. Instead, I took notes after he slept, writing every detail into the journal Michael had told me to keep. 2 nights left alone. Richard making fun of him. Sophie laughing. Evidence. The pattern was forming. She wanted freedom. And Ethan was an obstacle. But she underestimated me. I was not a weak, grieving grandmother. I was a professor who had spent her life studying human behavior. And I had just become her most dangerous opponent. The week after the Miami trip, Sophie called me early one morning. Her voice was smooth, almost casual. Margaret, let's have dinner tonight. Just the 2 of us. I think I've found a solution for everyone. A solution. The word alone told me she believed she had won, but I agreed, because I needed to see what she was planning. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind with white tablecloths, dim lighting, and portions so small they looked like decoration. Sophie was already seated, flawless in a black dress that suggested mourning yet clung to her like a fashion statement. She stood as I approached. kissing the air near my cheek. Thank you for coming. I ordered champagne. David always said you liked Veuve Clicquot. David knew perfectly well I preferred Chardonnay. Her lie was deliberate, designed to paint intimacy that had never existed. I sat quietly and let her pour. We raised our glasses, to new beginnings, she said, with a smile that never touched her eyes. I sipped politely. Waiting. Sophie leaned forward, lowering her voice as if confiding. These last weeks have been so hard. Losing David, helping Ethan adjust, handling the finances. But I think I've found a way to give us both peace of mind. I nodded, keeping my face open. What are you thinking? She smoothed the napkin on her lap, carefully rehearsing her performance. You and I both know David's will created complications. The house, the vehicles, the accounts. It's awkward. Not what he truly wanted. He wasn't in his right mind near the end. Too stressed. Too tired. Her eyes locked on mine. I spoke with an attorney who specializes in these matters. He said it would be easy to contest the will. We could claim diminished capacity, medications, stress, but that would drag on for years. Terrible for Ethan. I let the silence stretch. She mistook it for hesitation. So, she continued smoothly, I have a better idea. You transfer the house and the cars back to me. In exchange, I guarantee your visitation with Ethan every other weekend. Major holidays. I'll even put it in writing. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. She was bargaining with my grandson, as though he were property. I forced myself to set the fork down gently. That's quite an arrangement. Her smile widened. I know. Generous. Isn't it? Most women in my position would fight for everything. But I value your relationship with Ethan. Occasionally. I repeated softly. Yes. I'll need help now and then. Single motherhood is demanding. And of course, I will rebuild my personal life. Having guaranteed childcare would be tremendously helpful. There it was. The truth. Not about Ethan's well-being, but about her freedom. What about Ethan's trust fund? I asked lightly. Would that remain? As David arranged, a flash of irritation crossed her face before the smile returned. Honestly, it's unnecessarily complicated. As his mother, I should have control over his educational expenses. Children's needs change. Flexibility is important. I dabbed my lips with my napkin. Of course. Flexibility. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. I had my attorney draft this. Simple. Clean. Everyone wins. She slid the papers across the table. I picked them up, scanning enough to understand. If I signed, everything David had arranged would vanish. Sophie would hold all the assets. I would be reduced to a visitor in my grandson's life. I placed the papers back on the table with steady hands. This is thorough. May I take it home to review? Her smile faltered. I'd rather you sign tonight. David always told me never to sign anything without proper review. I said gently. I'd like Michael to look at it, just to be safe. Her eyes cooled, but she forced a laugh. Michael is old-fashioned. My attorney assures me this is standard. Even so, I replied. David's advice was clear. Important documents deserve careful consideration. She could not argue without insulting David's memory. So she leaned back, swirling the champagne in her glass. Take a few days. But Margaret, fighting me will only hurt Ethan in the long run. Remember that. Her tone was sweet, but the edge beneath it was sharp as a knife. I smiled faintly. Thank you for dinner. When I walked out of the restaurant, the night air felt heavy. I pulled the folded agreement from my purse, holding it like evidence in a trial. And that was exactly what it would become. Later, in Michael's office, he shook his head in disbelief. She actually put this in writing. This is coercion. A confession. Essentially, he highlighted sections with a yellow marker. She is offering visitation in exchange for assets. That is textbook manipulation. And this clause about relocation, it shows premeditation. She plans to move Ethan away. I stared at the papers. Anger and grief burning together in my chest. What do we do now? Michael opened a drawer and pulled out another envelope. This is the contingency plan David left. He hoped we would never use it. But it's time. Inside was a petition for emergency custody modification. My breath caught as I read. David had prepared for this exact moment. Michael's office was quiet except for the hum of the heater. The petition lay on the desk between us, the words blurring as I tried to steady my breathing. Custody, I whispered. You think a judge would really consider me over his own mother? Michael folded his hands. This is not about replacing Sophie. It is about Ethan's welfare during a fragile time. The evidence you've gathered is strong. The trip to Miami. The neglect. The proposal she tried to force on you. Judges act when a child's emotional health is at risk. I stared at the papers. My chest tight. I'm 66 years old. I'm not sure I have the strength. David believed you did, Michael said gently. And so do I. You've been Ethan's stability. That matters. I closed my eyes and saw my grandson's pale face after Miami. His small voice telling me he had been left alone in a strange hotel room. The decision was made. I'll do it, Michael nodded, sliding the petition back into his drawer for safekeeping. We'll need one more piece of evidence. A neutral psychologist will meet with Ethan. That will help the court see the truth. That evening, I tucked Ethan into bed. He clutched his stuffed bear and whispered, Grandma, Mom says we're going to Arizona soon. She said her parents miss me. My stomach turned cold. When did she tell you that? Yesterday? She said it's a surprise. I kissed his forehead, forcing calm into my voice. Don't worry about surprises right now. Just focus on your school project. But when I left his room, my hands shook. Arizona was not a visit. It was a strategy. She wanted distance, control, escape. The next morning, Michael called. The psychologist saw Ethan at school today. Her preliminary notes say he shows clear anxiety about leaving home. And he identifies you as his safe person. That's significant. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. We need to talk. Tonight. 7. At the house? Richard's attorney will join us. I showed it to Michael. Should I go? He shook his head firmly. Absolutely not. Once we file, all communication must go through counsel. She'll be served tomorrow afternoon. Tonight could get volatile. Stay away. That evening, I stayed home, making spaghetti with Ethan. He sprinkled cheese over his plate, his eyes lighting up. This is better than Mom's takeout pizza, he said. Mouthful. I forced a laugh. But inside, dread pressed down on me. Tomorrow would change everything. The next afternoon, a court server delivered the petition to Sophie at her office. I imagined her manicured hand opening the envelope, her perfect smile collapsing. Hours later, my phone exploded with her voice. You scheming, manipulative witch, how dare you try to steal my son? After everything I've done for you, my attorneys will destroy you. You'll never see Ethan again. I held the phone away until her shouting slowed. When she demanded I answer, I said calmly, on the advice of counsel, I cannot discuss this with you. I'll see you in court. The line went dead. I leaned against the counter, shaking with both fear and relief. That night, Ethan asked softly, Grandma, why did Mom sound so mad on the phone? Did I do something wrong? I pulled him close. No. Sweetheart, none of this is your fault. Sometimes, adults fight about things that have nothing to do with children. You are loved. That's what matters. He nodded, still uncertain. But he smiled when I offered him another scoop of spaghetti. The following morning, I dressed in a navy suit I had not worn in years. It felt stiff on my shoulders. But Michael said it would convey steadiness. At breakfast, Ethan studied me curiously. Why are you dressed like a teacher again? I have an important meeting. I told him, Mrs. Wilson will take you to school today. Either Mom or I will pick you up later. He accepted it with the ease of a child used to unpredictability. I hugged him longer than usual at the door. At the courthouse, marble floors echoed under my shoes. Michael met me at the entrance, his face solemn. Sophie is here with her attorney, Gerald Winters. He's aggressive, But Judge Carlton won't be swayed by theatrics. Inside the courtroom, Sophie looked transformed. Her hair pulled back modestly, her dress conservative, her face framed with sorrow. Beside her sat Winters, sharp-suited and confident. On the table before them stood a framed photo of David and Ethan, staged for sympathy. When our eyes met, hers flashed with pure venom before she shifted back to her role as grieving widow. Judge Carlton entered, gray-haired and stern. "This is an emergency hearing regarding custody of minor child Ethan Carter," she said firmly. "I have reviewed the petition. Let us proceed." Michael began, his voice calm and precise. He outlined Sophie's pattern of neglect. The Miami trip, the proposal to trade assets for visitation, the recordings of her absences, the psychologist's evaluation. Winters rose in response, his voice dripping with charm. "Your Honor, this is nothing more than an interfering mother-in-law, unable to let go of control. My client is a grieving widow doing her best. Temporary lapses are normal after such trauma. Mrs. Ney. Turner's obsessive note-taking shows fixation, not truth. When it was my turn, my legs felt heavy, but I stood and spoke from the only place I knew my heart. I am not trying to replace Sophie. I am asking for stability for my grandson. He has already lost his father. He should not lose his sense of home as well." My voice shook, but Judge Carlton listened, her expression unreadable. Finally, she raised a hand. "I will review the evidence in chambers. Court will recess for 1 hour." We filed out into the hall, tension thick in the air. Sophie whispered harshly to Winters, her mask slipping, her face twisted with fury as she glanced at me. Michael leaned close. "Whatever happens, you've done everything right. The evidence is strong. Trust the process." I nodded, clutching my purse, inside of which rested David's letter. His voice echoed in my mind. "Watch. Wait. Protect Ethan." The hallway outside the courtroom smelled faintly of polish and old paper. I sat on a wooden bench, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles had turned white. 1 hour had never felt so long. Ethan was at school, unaware that strangers in black robes and expensive suits were deciding the course of his childhood. I prayed he would stay blissfully unaware for just a little while longer. At last, the bailiff opened the door. "Court is back in session." Michael touched my arm. "Stay calm. Listen carefully. Whatever the ruling, we adjust." I rose on unsteady legs and followed him inside. Judge Carlton was already seated, her glasses perched low on her nose as she shuffled papers. "This court has reviewed all evidence and testimony," she began, her voice firm. "I find sufficient cause for emergency intervention in the current custody arrangement." My breath caught. "Temporary guardianship of minor child Ethan Carter is hereby granted to his grandmother, Margaret Turner, for a period of 60 days. During this time, a full evaluation of the family situation will be conducted by court-appointed specialists." The words struck like thunder. For a moment I could not move. I had hoped, but I had not dared to believe. Judge Carlton continued, "Mrs. Carter will be granted supervised visitation 3 times weekly. Neither party may remove the child from this jurisdiction without court approval." Across the room, Sophie's carefully composed mask shattered, her mouth twisted, her voice rising despite Winter's restraining hand. "This is outrageous. She's stealing my son. This is all lies. I won't accept it." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Carter, your outburst is concerning. I strongly advise you to focus on demonstrating mature parenting capacity during the evaluation period." The gavel struck wood. Court is adjourned. The room erupted in murmurs. Sophie spun toward me, tears streaking her flawless makeup. "You think you've won? This isn't over. You have no idea what I'm capable of." Michael stepped between us, his voice low but steady. "Mrs. Carter, all communication now goes through counsel. Do not approach my client." She wrenched her arm free and stormed out, her heels clattering against the tile like gunfire. I collapsed onto the bench outside, My body trembling. Michael placed a steady hand on my shoulder. For today, Ethan is safe. That's what matters. When I picked Ethan up from school later, he ran toward me. Backpack bouncing. Grandma, why are you smiling? He asked. Surprised. I crouched down, hugging him tightly. Because we're going to spend more time together. How does that sound? He grinned. Then whispered, Does that mean Mom isn't taking me to Arizona? I nodded. Not right now. Sweetheart. Relief softened his features. He slipped his hand into mine. And in that simple gesture, I felt the weight of David's trust pressing firmly on my shoulders. That evening, over spaghetti again, Ethan chattered about school projects while I listened, nodding, filing every word into memory. I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Sophie would not give up quietly. Sure enough, my phone buzzed late that night. Her name lit the screen. I let it go to voicemail. The message came sharp and venomous. You can play hero for now, but I will fight until Ethan is mine again. You won't outsmart me. I pressed delete, then opened my journal. I wrote down every word, every tone, every threat, evidence. The next days were a blur of new routines. I walked Ethan to school, packed his lunches, helped with his homework. We planted tomatoes in the backyard, something David and I had always done together. At night, Ethan would crawl into bed with me when nightmares came. I stroked his hair and whispered, You are safe. I promise. But safety was fragile. Each time the phone rang, my stomach tightened, fearing it would be Sophie or her attorney. Michael kept me updated. She's angry. She's meeting with Winters daily. Expect attempts to discredit you. One afternoon, Ethan came home quiet. His shoulders slumped. Mom told me you're trying to take me away from her, he said softly. Is that true? The pain in his eyes nearly broke me. I pulled him onto my lap, holding him close. No, sweetheart. I'm trying to make sure you are safe and cared for. Your mom loves you, but right now, things are complicated. This is about protecting you. He nodded slowly, not fully convinced, but comforted enough to rest his head against my chest. After he fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table staring at David's letter. You taught me to see people clearly. Now I need you to protect my son. I whispered into the quiet. I will. David, I swear it. The weeks after the hearing felt like living inside a storm. Every day carried a new gust of tension. But within our home, I tried to build calm for Ethan. He thrived with routine. Homework at the kitchen table. Bedtime stories read in soft light. Pancakes on Saturday mornings, slowly. His shoulders loosened. His laughter returned, and the shadows in his eyes began to lift. Sophie, however, unraveled. At first she attended the supervised visits, arriving with expensive gifts that sparkled but could not hide her impatience. She sat scrolling through her phone, offering Ethan promises she rarely kept. Trips to amusement parks that never materialized. A puppy she never brought. Each broken word chipped away at Ethan's trust. Then came the visit when she appeared with Richard Hale in tow. The supervisor stopped them at the door, explaining the order allowed only her. Sophie exploded, shouting about unfairness, accusing everyone of conspiring against her. Ethan watched from across the room, his face pale, his hands clenched. When she stormed out, he buried his head against my chest and whispered, Why does she get so mad at me? You didn't do anything wrong. I told him, sometimes adults carry anger that has nothing to do with their children. But I wrote it down in my journal. Every word. Every tear. Every absence. 2 weeks later, Sophie missed 2 visits in a row. Her excuse was business meetings. But I knew better. Michael's investigator confirmed she had flown to Miami with Richard again. She's losing interest in maintaining appearances, Michael said grimly. That works in our favor. Judges notice patterns. Abandonment is hard to explain away. Then, suddenly, she tried a new tactic. Her attorney filed a motion to dismiss the custody case altogether. The claim was shocking. They accused me of manipulating Ethan, of coaching him to lie, of inventing neglect where none existed. When Michael explained this, my chest burned. They're saying I made everything up. He nodded. But our documentation is strong. The psychologist's evaluation is clear. Still, the motion will be heard next week. We have to be prepared. Ethan sensed the tension. One night, he asked softly, "Grandma, if the judge makes me go live with Mom, will you still visit me?" The ache in his voice pierced my heart. "Sweetheart, no matter what, I will always be here for you. Nothing can change that." He leaned against me, whispering, "I don't want to leave." I kissed his forehead and silently promised David all over again. I would not let that happen. The morning of the dismissal hearing, Sophie arrived in court with Winters by her side, dressed in pristine white, her hair pulled back like an angel in mourning. Her performance was flawless. She shed tears on cue, spoke of her beloved son, and accused me of obsession. But then the judge asked why she had missed 3 supervised visits in the last month. Her explanation faltered. She spoke of business trips. But Michael produced the investigator's report showing her in Miami with Richard. Her face tightened, the cracks in her performance showing. The judge delayed ruling, requesting more reports from the court-appointed evaluator. But outside the courtroom, Sophie turned on me with venom. "You won't win. Richard and I are building something bigger than you can imagine. Ethan will have the life he deserves, and you can rot in that old house alone." Her words rang hollow, more desperate than threatening. Michael leaned close and whispered, "She's slipping. Just keep documenting." Weeks passed. Ethan blossomed. He won a prize at the science fair, played soccer with friends, laughed again without looking over his shoulder. But Sophie's presence faded further and further. She canceled visits. She sent no calls. Even Ethan began to notice. "Maybe Mom doesn't want to see me anymore," he said one evening, staring at his untouched dinner. "She loves you," I replied gently, though I doubted my own words. "But right now, she's making choices that keep her away. That's not about you." Still, I wrote it down. Every missed visit, every unanswered call, evidence piling higher than any lie could bury. Then one afternoon, Michael called with urgency in his voice. "Eleanor, our investigator confirmed Sophie and Richard placed deposits on property in the Cayman Islands. They're planning to relocate permanently." My blood ran cold. "She's leaving Ethan behind. Looks that way," Michael said. "She can't risk the court battle. Richard is offering her a new life, and she's choosing him." That night, Sophie texted me directly. "Meet me tomorrow. Riverside Park. Alone." Michael insisted I record the conversation legally. So the next day, I walked to the park, my heart pounding. Sophie sat on a bench by the water, sunglasses shielding her eyes. When she finally spoke, her tone was flat, stripped of performance. "I'm signing over custody to you. No more court. No more evaluations. I'll send money. Maybe call on birthdays. But I'm done." I stared at her, barely believing. "Why?" She shrugged, her lips curling. "Richard's development in Cayman will take years. I can't drag a child through that. Ethan needs stability. You can give it. I can't. Not anymore." Her words were casual, but underneath them was pure self-interest. Ethan was no longer leverage. He was baggage. When I walked away from that bench, the weight of David's letter settled differently in my chest. He had been right. He had known her better than she knew herself. 1 week later, we stood before Judge Carlton again. Her chambers were quiet, lined with books and framed diplomas. Sophie's attorney handed over the signed papers, confirming her voluntary surrender of custody. The judge studied the document for a long moment. "This is unusual," she said, glancing at me over the rims of her glasses. "Mrs. Carter has agreed to transfer full custody of her son to his grandmother, with support payments and limited visitation at your discretion. Are you prepared to assume this responsibility?" "Mrs. Turner." Without hesitation, I answered, "Yes." Your Honor, Ethan needs stability, and I can provide it. Judge Carlton signed the order with a swift stroke of her pen. Then it is done. Ethan Carter is now in your custody. I exhaled shakily. The weight of months of fear, planning, and confrontation lifted, replaced by something steadier, relief, resolve. Sophie did not attend that day. She was already on a plane with Richard, chasing new dreams in Cayman. Her absence said more than her presence ever could. That evening, I sat with Ethan at the kitchen table. He drew pictures of planets, labeling them carefully. Grandma, does this mean I live here now? Always, I nodded, stroking his hair. Yes, sweetheart, this is your home. Always. He leaned against me with a sigh that carried both sadness and comfort. I'm glad. I don't like hotels anymore. We planted a small garden together that weekend. Roses, lilies, and a stone bench where Ethan could sit when he wanted to talk to his dad. As we patted soil around the roots, he asked softly, "Do you think Dad knew Mom would leave?" The question pierced me with its honesty. I wiped sweat from my brow, choosing words carefully. I think your dad saw that sometimes adults make choices based on what they want, not what children need. He wanted to make sure you would always have someone who put you first. Ethan nodded, satisfied with that answer. He watered the roses with a small plastic can, his face calm for the first time in weeks. Months passed. Routine settled into our lives like sunlight through clean glass. Ethan excelled in school, joined the soccer team, and laughed more often. I found joy in parenting again, a role I had never expected to resume at 66, but one that gave my days purpose. Then one afternoon, Michael visited with a small box in his hands. David asked me to deliver this once everything was resolved, he explained. Inside the box was another letter, written in my son's hand. Mom, if you are reading this, you've done what I could not. You protected Ethan when I feared I would not be there to do it. I know the burden is heavy, but I also know there is no one stronger. Tell Ethan stories about me, not just the good ones, but the real ones. Tell him how I made mistakes, how I tried to fix them, how I sometimes saw the truth too late. Teach him that love means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. I love you both, more than words will ever capture. David. Tears blurred the page as I pressed it to my chest. David had trusted me completely, and through his foresight, his son was safe. Years flowed quickly after that. Ethan grew taller, more confident, his smile reaching his eyes again. At 11, he bounded through the door one afternoon, script in hand. Grandma, I got the lead in the school play. Guess what? Ms. Larson said Dad played the same role when he was my age. I laughed through tears, hugging him tightly. Your father would be so proud. We built a life together, stitched from grief and resilience, from love and second chances. The house on Willow Lane, once a battlefield, became our sanctuary. Every photo on the fridge, every drawing taped to the wall, and told the story of a boy who had lost much but found safety again. Sometimes, when the evenings grew quiet, I would sit on the porch swing with Ethan beside me. He would ask about his father, and I would tell him stories, funny ones, hard ones, real ones, and I would remind him of the last promise David made in his letter. That love, even in the face of betrayal and loss, endures. Sophie never returned. Her support checks arrived on schedule, her voice absent from Ethan's life. He stopped asking about her eventually, choosing instead to pour his energy into school, friends, and the family we built together. One night, as we watered the roses in the garden, Ethan looked up at me. Grandma, do you think Dad knows how happy I am now? I smiled, brushing his hair back. Yes, sweetheart, I think he knows. And I think he's smiling too. The sky darkened above us, stars flickering to life one by one. I held my grandson's hand, grateful for the chance David had given me, a chance to protect, to heal, and to love again. And in that moment, I knew the story of our family was no longer about loss. It was about survival, resilience, and the simple truth that love always has the final word.